Just as a heads up, this video will contain massive spoilers for the World of Warcraft Traveler novel series, and those spoilers are pretty much unavoidable, since for now at least, the character I'm going to talk about has only appeared there. I would definitely recommend that you read those novels. For those of you who don't mind the spoilers, here's my favorite Forsaken character, the Whisper Man. Someone who, in my opinion, embodies the struggles of the Forsaken, of the self-aware undead, and manages to rise above them, who breaks the mold typical of many of other Forsaken characters. In life, the man who would come to be nicknamed as the Whisper Man was called Rhaego Valdred, a native of the Kingdom of Stormwind. He served his nation as a member of SI-7, becoming one of its most elite members. His missions took him to various places across Azeroth, including, unless it was just a continuity gaffe, to Kalimdor before it was rediscovered by the humans during the Third War. You can more or less think of him as a James Bond type of character in life, a roguish, handsome secret agent achieving the most difficult and impossible missions for his country, while also sleeping with the women he encountered, including a harsh pirate captain whom he dueled with. He thought of himself, in his own words, as a, quote, patriotic rogue. And at this point in life he was a principled man, killing only those that threatened his king and country. For his extraordinary services, King Varian Wrynn granted him the title of Baron, and even offered him the option to retire with a handsome reward. Rhaego Valdred, who was pushing 40, considered an ancient age in the SI-7, refused. He simply enjoyed his work too much. When rumors of a strange plague in Lordran reached Stormwind, the Baron volunteered to investigate. While on his mission, he became afflicted by it and, weakened, he succumbed to the undead tide that slew him and brought him back from the dead. His story then follows a path typical of many Forsaken. He served as a shambling flesh puppet of the Lich King until he was freed by Sylvanas Windrunner. There is one notable thing about his service in the Scourge when compared to many other Forsaken. Unlike them, including in this regard Nathanos Blightcaller himself, Rhaego Valdred had a strong enough mind that he was, admittedly barely, aware of his actions. He was conscious enough and could see himself killing his former loved ones and shambling in a ruined body, but was, obviously, unable to stop himself in the face of the Lich King's domination. It goes without saying that this experience, which he himself called his darkest time, traumatized and changed Rhaego. It was the only time in his life, and in his unlife, where he wished for a true death. Even as a Forsaken, he despised his undead existence. Even when he had gotten used to it and it no longer bothered him, he still considered himself as living a, quote, prolonged cursed existence. Naturally, when he was freed by Sylvanas, he was truly grateful and swore fealty to her. For a time, he fought alongside the Forsaken in the Plague Lands, only to realize that their struggle against the Scourge would never end. Growing bored of just slaying mindless undead, he asked the Banshee Queen to release him from his vow, which she, begrudgingly as Rhaego stated, agreed to. After leaving the Plague Lands, Rhaego sought work as a mercenary and paid assassin, not because he needed the money, but because he sought to occupy his mind. He kept in mind the warning that the Banshee Queen had given him when he left her service, that, no matter how open-minded, the living would never accept him, even due to the simple fact of how he smelled of death, and as a result he always doused himself in jasmine water to hide the scent. Eventually, he encountered the villains of the Traveler series, the group known as the Hidden, who offered him a job that he considered suitable of his skills, working as their spy master and as a skilled swordsman. Throughout the novels, where for about 80% of the time he is a villain, Rhaego Valdred comes across as a great representation of a, to use a D&D term, chaotic neutral character. And yes, with the implication of chaotic stupid, but it's definitely done right, in that he always does things to amuse himself, often to the point of threatening the plans of the villains, though not to the extent of actually sabotaging them. As an example, and this scene actually made me laugh out loud at the time, at one point in the second novel, one of the protagonists, Makasa Flintwill, lures the villains into having a cage match in the Gadgetzan arena. She does so by telling Baron Noggenfogger on the spur of the moment that These pirates had stolen her cheese. When Nagenfalger asks the villains whether they intend to return the cheese, and most of them stare extremely confused at him, Rhaego chuckles and loudly declares, "We will never return the cheese." Later on, when some of Mikasa's allies join her in the arena and Nagenfalger is considering banning them, Rhaego smiles and tells the Baron, "More aggrieved individuals seeking redress. We stole a significant amount of cheese." These events might make you, dear viewer, think that Rhaego Valdred acts like nothing more than a clown, but that's definitely not the case. Throughout the novel he is, with the exception of the main villains, probably the most threatening of the villain group. He is a master swordsman who almost always outperforms his opponents in combat and definitely comes across as very dangerous to the protagonists. He is also fairly unique in that he is very durable and has the ability to reattach any limbs he loses in combat without the intervention of any healers. As for the reason he constantly has these chaotic stupid moments, it is revealed and expanded upon in the second and third novels of the series. Rhaego Valdred was gripped with what he had lost when he was turned into an undead. Life lost its luster and he became a very cynical and pessimistic person. To quote his own thoughts, he missed life, or living anyway, not this travesty of existence he whispered his way through now. His voice was a whisper, his movement was a whisper. His effect on those around him, even as a stone-cold killer, was hardly more than a whisper. He wasn't a man any longer, but some kind of whisper man." End quote. He chose to make these little amusements for himself in order to feel some small connection to life. The very reason he chose to work with the Hidden was because the job heavily reminded him of the work he had done for SI-7. In fact, his fondest memory of his unlife was when he encountered a pirate, quite possibly the pirate captain I had mentioned before, who kissed him for old time's sake, as Rhaego called it. The, quote, only touch of affection he'd been shown since dying, end quote. While he was definitely a ruthless killer as a Forsaken mercenary, he did have some principles and standards he abided by. Above all else, more than any mission he was on, he hated the Scourge. At one point in the novel, he tracked down two of the protagonists to Razorfen Downs, where they were about to be sacrificed by the Quillbor Blackthorn, who was working with the Scourge. Upon seeing this, Rhaego immediately stopped his pursuit and turned to Blackthorn. "You! What is your game?" "What are you?" "I am Baron Rhaego Valdred, and I am Forsaken Abomination." "Whom do you raise, lunatic?" "I raise Amnonal the Codebringer, and when he comes, you will once again find yourself under the yoke of the Scourge." "Over my undead body." "So be it." And following this exchange, Rhaego single-handedly ended the threat of the Death's Head Quillbor, something which he relayed to the other villains with much pride, in spite of the fact that they were less than pleased that he let the two protagonists escape. He also heavily disliked watching children suffer. When the hidden villain had his "No, Aramar, I am your uncle" moment with the main protagonist, he physically winced watching the young boys suffer emotionally. This was also partly the reason why he decided to turn against the Hidden. During a battle in Stone Talon, one of the Arakoa villains, who heavily disliked him, tried to opportunistically kill him with shadow magic. Rhaego, however, was saved by the young Dryad Drella, one of the protagonists, who also acknowledged his good work in Razorfen Downs. Eventually, after the battle was practically won by the villains, when the wounded Dryad was about to be cut down by the Hidden leader, Rhaego placed himself between them and tried to protect her. For his effort, the Arakoa spellcaster I mentioned threw him off a cliff with his magic. The Forsaken survived, albeit in pieces, and from this point on he convinced the protagonist to let him join them because he sought vengeance on the Hidden. Though he was definitely not trusted at the beginning and was carried, still split into pieces, in a backpack. Even before, he was heavily interested in one of the protagonists I mentioned before, Mikasa Flintwill, due to her fighting style. During the battle, he recalled that her fighting style was the same as the pirate captain I mentioned before, whom he had had a dalliance with while he was still alive. And later on, he realized that he had slept with that pirate captain, Makasa's mother, 9 months before she was born. I guess you can see where this is going. He doesn't reveal their connection immediately, but instead studies her and tries to guide her, subtly at first and later directly, both by teaching her how to handle information as a spy and how to improve her stealth and combat skills. Quite frankly, he is himself not sure at first how to approach her and how to relate to her, especially given that she heavily distrusted him, for good reason obviously. Eventually he does indirectly tell her the truth during one of their conversations, by first asking some very specific questions, then mentioning that he met her mother 18 years prior, and asking if she knew her father. The realization, though it comes naturally to her, shocks Mikasa and she runs away for the moment. During this time, Rhaego was so concerned that many of the protagonists noticed, despite the spy master attempting to hide it. She does fairly quickly come to accept that Rhaego is her father, but their relationship is obviously very rocky and somewhat awkward. For his part, while he was initially very unsure how to deal with meeting his previously unknown daughter, the discovery does indirectly help bring about his character development. In that sense, he eventually decides to let go of his ills, to stop focusing on what he had lost when he died and was brought back as an undead, and focus instead on what he had to gain. To quote his own thoughts, the respect of a daughter, the revenge of a wronged man, the dignity of a soldier. And from this moment on, he collaborates fully with the group of protagonists. His relationship with his daughter also brings about one of the only moments, besides when he faced the Death's Head Quillboar, where Rhaego becomes truly furious and loses his cool. Namely, during the final battle against the villains, as the main antagonist is threatening to kill Mikasa, he is instead hit with a knife thrown by Rhaego, who yells out, "Get away from my daughter, you filth!" After the main events of the novels, Mikasa and Rhaego buy their own custom ship, the Dryad, with the daughter as captain and the father as first mate, and the undead doesn't lose his dry sense of humor. So this was the story of my personal favorite Forsaken character, Baron Rhaego Valdred, nicknamed the Whisper Man. Thank you all very much for watching and listening to me. Please leave any thoughts you might have in the comments below, and I will see you all later. Farewell.